On August 12, 1985, a warm summer evening in Japan, hundreds of families boarded a short domestic flight, expecting a routine trip home after the Obon holiday. Parents held their children close. Businessmen loosened their ties after a long day. The aircraft was a Boeing 747 SR, specifically designed for short-range, high-capacity flights across Japan's busy routes. Its destination was Osaka, barely an hour away from Tokyo's Haneda Airport. For the 524 people on board, this was supposed to be nothing more than an uneventful journey. But 32 minutes later, the flight would become the deadliest single aircraft accident in aviation history. Only 4 people would survive. The crash of Japan Airlines Flight 123 is not just a story of mechanical failure. It is a story of corporate negligence, of a ticking time bomb hidden within the aircraft's skin, of a crew fighting an impossible battle against physics itself, and of passengers, hundreds of them, who had just enough time to understand that death was coming and to say goodbye in the only way they could. To understand how this tragedy came to pass, we must first look back 7 years before the crash. In 1978, that same Boeing 747 SR suffered what's known as a tail strike. During landing at Osaka, the rear of the plane scraped violently against the runway, damaging the aft pressure bulkhead, a critical component that sealed the cabin against the thin air outside. Repairs were made, carried out by Boeing engineers, but they were not made correctly. Instead of a continuous single-piece splice plate across the damaged bulkhead, Boeing used 2 smaller plates, fastened with insufficient rows of rivets. This improper repair introduced a weak point, one that could not be seen by the eye, but one which guaranteed eventually that same bulkhead would fail. Every flight that aircraft took, every cycle of pressurization and depressurization strained that repair. Slowly, invisibly, a crack spread across the bulkhead, and by August of 1985, it was a death sentence waiting to be triggered. At 6:12 p.m., Flight 123 lifted off from Haneda Airport. On board were 509 passengers and 15 crew members. Many were returning home after visiting family graves during the Obon festival. Among them was singer Kiyu Sakamoto, famous worldwide for the hit song Sukiyaki. Children chatted and pressed their faces to the window as the jumbo jet soared over Tokyo Bay. In the cockpit, Captain Masami Takahama, First Officer Yutaka Sasaki, and Flight Engineer Hiroshi Fukuda settled into what they expected would be a short, smooth flight. But at 6:24 p.m., just 12 minutes after takeoff, everything changed. A deafening boom ripped through the aircraft. The rear pressure bulkhead, weakened by Boeing's flawed repair, finally ruptured. The explosive decompression tore away the vertical stabilizer, the massive fin on the tail that keeps the plane steady in flight. At the same moment, all 4 hydraulic lines snaking through the tail were severed. To the passengers, it must have felt like an explosion. The cabin depressurized violently, oxygen masks fell from the ceiling, and the entire aircraft shuddered. To the pilots, the effect was catastrophic. The Boeing 747 lost all hydraulic power. That meant no ailerons, no elevators, no rudder. In other words, no ability to steer or stabilize the plane. A Boeing 747 without hydraulics is nothing more than a falling brick with engines. And yet, the crew did not give up. Captain Takahama and his team struggled to control the aircraft by using engine thrust alone. They throttled the left engines to try to turn right, and the right engines to try to turn left. The plane entered what's called a phugoid cycle, a horrifying oscillation in which it would climb, stall, then dive, over and over again. To those inside, it was like being strapped to a roller coaster, spiraling out of control. Air traffic control tried desperately to assist, Radar screens lit up with Flight 123's erratic path. The crew radioed back, voices strained, describing the impossible situation. And here, in the Cockpit Voice Recorder, we hear the most haunting details of all. In the cabin, passengers realized what was happening. The flight lasted 32 agonizing minutes after the initial failure, long enough for many to write farewell notes on pieces of paper, on air sickness bags, on scraps torn from magazines. These notes would later be recovered from the wreckage. Messages of love, of apology, of final words scrawled in shaky handwriting as the plane bucked and dived. One read, "Mama, this looks like the end. Thank you for everything you've done. Please take care of the children." Another, "We are going down. I am grateful for the life I had." Imagine being strapped into your seat, the air thin and cold from decompression, the lights flickering, the engines roaring as you tried to hold your child close, trying to write one last goodbye in the shaking cabin. At 6:56 p.m., Flight 123 slammed into the wooded slopes of Mount Takamagahara in Gunma Prefecture. The force tore the aircraft apart. Most of the 520 victims died instantly from the impact. Others perished in the fire that followed, but some survived the crash itself. 4 women were found alive the next day. One was a 26-year-old off-duty flight attendant who had been seated near the rear of the aircraft. Another was a mother who clutched her 8-year-old daughter through the impact. Tragically, the child did not survive, but the mother lived. 2 young girls also survived, pulled from the wreckage by rescuers. And here lies another dark layer of this tragedy: the rescue effort. Authorities hesitated to send immediate search and rescue teams into the mountains that night. Reports conflicted about the location of the crash. By the time rescuers arrived the following morning, many who had survived the initial impact had succumbed to their injuries. The cries of survivors had been heard by locals in the mountains overnight. By morning, most of those voices had gone silent. The survivors later described waking in the wreckage, surrounded by fire and smoke, and the sound of people crying out in the dark. Then, one by one, those voices faded. To know that help might have saved more lives only deepens the horror of what happened. The investigation was swift and damning. It revealed that Boeing's repair of the aft pressure bulkhead in 1978 had been botched. The use of 2 splice plates instead of 1, the insufficient rivets, and the lack of proper oversight created the fatal weakness. Boeing accepted responsibility. Japan Airlines also faced immense criticism for its maintenance oversight. In the aftermath, aviation safety protocols were overhauled. Repairs to aircraft structures were scrutinized more heavily. Training for hydraulic failures became a priority. Boeing redesigned how it tracked and inspected repairs, but none of it could undo the loss of 520 lives. Today, on the mountain where Flight 123 went down, a memorial stands. Every year, families of the victims make the climb to honor their loved ones. They place flowers, recite prayers, and remember that summer evening when a simple flight home turned into a national tragedy. The crash of Japan Airlines Flight 123 is more than an aviation accident. It is a reminder of how fragile life is, of how a single mistake, hidden for years, can erupt into catastrophe. It is the sound of a captain whispering goodbye into his radio. It is the image of a mother writing her last words to her children. It is the eerie silence on a mountainside, broken only by fading cries in the dark. The crew of Japan Airlines Flight 123 fought with every ounce of their skill and training for 32 long, grueling minutes. With no controls, no hydraulics, and simply no hope of recovery, they still managed to keep that massive aircraft in the sky longer than anyone believed possible. Their determination, their refusal to give up even as the odds closed in, is nothing short of extraordinary. But in the end, physics won. The damage hidden within the metal was simply too great, and their struggle ended on the mountainside. If there's anything to be taken away from this story, it is this. Life is fragile. Ordinary days can turn extraordinary in the blink of an eye. So hold close the ones you love. Cherish the moments you're given, and never take a single breath for granted.